Well, there's 125 years of history hidden right here in Pembroke. Joining me now, Doug Fee, president of the Ottawa River
Power Corporation.
Power Corporation. Why am I having so much trouble with that
It's a long title.
Oh, I know. It's such a tough one. How are you doing?
Just great.
Good. Okay, so when was the Hydro Museum created?
The building itself was built in 1931 when the town needed more generation. And the generation, which is the center point of the museum, was built then. But the museum itself was created in 1976. And what happened then was the generator came to the end of its life, and it was decided to leave it here as a centerpiece for the museum rather than have it taken away as scrap.
So that's what this is, a massive generator?
What it is a large diesel engine and a generator at this end. So what we're looking at right here is the generator part of the machine, and back behind is the 6-cylinder diesel.
So how does it work?
Well, just like
when it did work, rather.
When it did work, it was just like a diesel in a large truck. It sat here and burned diesel fuel, drove the engine, and in turn, that turned the generator at this end, which produced the power.
Massive turbine used to spin.
This would spin at about 200 RPM.
Okay. So what are some of the other pieces that you've got here inside the museum? Like what is this?
When it was decided to turn it into a museum, the generator was a centerpiece, but then the person that started the museum, Murray Moore, gathered all these other artifacts around from the early days of electricity. So this piece here is the arc projector from the O'Brien Theatre, which is just 2 doors down the street.
I know exactly where the O'Brien Theatre is.
Spent many years, Saturday afternoons there?
Sure did. Well, in Renfrew, right? Because there's one there as well. But now, when was the first electric light in North America officially lit?
Well, we make the claim we had the first municipal street light in 1883. And it would have been an arc light with power from the first generating station that was on the Muskrat River.
And is that an example of what that arc light would have looked like here?
Well, that's an arc light, yes, but it's one that would be in a person's parlor.
Oh.
And that one was probably dating back to the 1800s, and it's hardly ever been used, but there's probably a good reason. If you had that in your parlor, it'd just be like having a welding machine in your parlor. It would be intensely bright. It would blind you if you looked at it.
Okay, all right, so one to light the entire house. So now when people come in, it's a self-guided tour, so you've got sort of little information blurbs throughout the museum. But what's this screen here? What's the movie?
We also have a little film strip, a PowerPoint presentation with some dialogue explaining the history of the museum, history of electricity in Pembroke, and what the displays are all about.
So you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier in the morning. Why do you think that Pembroke, of all places, was home to one of the very first electric lights in all of North America?
Well, a couple of good reasons. One is we had the first generation was at a sawmill plant owned by Mr. McAllister on the Muskrat River, and it made sense there to get electric lights because he could operate the mill later at night to get more production out. That was quickly sold to a bunch of Pembroke businessmen. And Pembroke was very fortunate years and years ago of being a fairly rich town because of the lumber trade.
Right, the lumber barons.
A couple of lumber barons plus hardware barons bought it and expanded, created a private company called Pembroke Electric Light Company that expanded and looked after the generation and distribution of power in Pembroke, as well as up to Camp Petawawa, and they had a lot of expansion there after the war, as well as down to what we call the 5-mile crossing south of town, as well as over in Quebec.
Okay, so we've actually got Mr. Moore, the man who created the museum, in the building, and we will be speaking to him a little bit later in the show, right?
Excellent.
Stay with us. That's all to come later from Pembroke.